Hey guys, welcome back to this little segment where we explore classical Japanese through the medium of video games. This is the second one of these videos, and today specifically we are going to be looking at the second of the Mythic Tales from Ghost of Tsushima, which is done completely in Japanese, and there are a lot of cool things we can learn from this. Hopefully you learn something from this, you find this educational, and you find it somewhat entertaining, and through exploring how the language of classical Japanese works in some of these video games, you can come to appreciate them more and understand just how cool your games that you love are and how cool classical Japanese is. So with that all being said, let's get right into the actual meat and potatoes of today's video, okay? Okay, so let's begin by exploring the second mythic tale, the Legend of Tadayori, I think is his name, Tadayori, and we'll go over the grammar and how it all works, and you'll see how cool it actually is, okay? So, let's begin. Okay, first sentence. First word, iku. Now, this is an old way of saying several. It expresses an unknown number of multiple of. It's a what's the word? Fukusu. What's fukusu? It's plural. So it's saying several, many, but it's not giving us a hard concrete answer. So iku is several, but an unknown number ultimately, just more than one. And then momo. Momo is the old way of saying 100. In modern Japanese, we now say hyaku, but a long, long time ago, they said momo. That was the normal way of saying it. And then tose. Tose, nowadays in modern Japanese, we say toshi, but that means years. So iku momo tose. Several hundred years. And then we have the particle no, that little like windy, spirally looking thing. No, in this case, is a particle that means of. The closest thing that I can translate it to in English is of. It essentially functions the same in classical Japanese as it does in modern Japanese, if you are aware of modern Japanese. But so, of, okay, so several hundred years of, and then this next kanji is mukashi. Now, you'll hear me say that a lot when I'm telling my stories, is ima wa mukashi. Mukashi means essentially a long time ago, sometime in the past is what it's pointing out. Turn this down just a little bit. It's pointing out the past. So iku momo tose no mukashi ka. So several hundred years in the past. Okay, and then the ka is there. Ka is a questioning particle. Essentially, what it does is it expresses a little certain sense of doubt. So it's saying that we don't concretely know when this happened because it's a densho, it's a mythic tale that was passed down over time. So we don't know exactly when it happened, only that it happened several centuries ago, and that's about all we know. Okay, first sentence done. Nagao Tadayori ko. Okay, Nagao Tadayori ko. So this is basically just his name. Nagao is his family name. Tadayori is his given name. But ko, that last kanji, ko, literally means public, okay? But oftentimes in classical Japanese, it's used to refer to the emperor and the court and the nobility. So it's an honorific suffix, as you probably know if you know Japanese, you know, like san, sama, and some of those other things. Or a little bit older, you might know dono, or tono rather. This was something that they did a long time ago. It just represented the fact that he was a member of the aristocracy to some degree. He wasn't a commoner. He wasn't a peasant. Well, actually, he was a commoner, but he wasn't a peasant, you know. And that he was technically in service to the emperor is what I believe it means, but it's just kind of an honorific suffix. So it's just saying, this is our guy, Nagao Tadayori. Okay, so first kanji, oto, okay? This first kanji here, let me pull up my mouse so you can, actually, I don't know if you can see. So, oto is sound, okay? Sound. And then ni is a particle that's a little hard to explain in English. If you study modern Japanese, you know what it means already. But it marks a place, or it marks a direction. I don't know how else to describe it other than and it's a really weird concept. For a lot of these things, if you guys don't know Japanese already, you're going to have to really like unbind the way you think about things and linguistically to try to understand in a very, very approximate, vague way what it's trying to say. Because Japanese is a very different language from English, and classical Japanese even more so. So, oto, ni, so to or toward the sound. And then this next kanji right here, kikoyuru. This next word, kikoyuru. Modern Japanese, kikoeru, which is a phrase that you will likely have heard, which is funny because that's what it means. It means to be heard. The root verb is kiku, which means to hear, but it's in this form which makes it passive. So instead of so-and-so hears, it is such and such is heard by so-and-so. That's what passive is. It's in English, you'd say, I see a dog. But if we were to say that in passive, it is the dog is seen by me. And the reason why they do that is because sometimes you want to say the same thing, but you want the emphasis not to be on the thing that is doing the action, but the thing that is receiving the action. So that's essentially what that is. So in this instance, what it's really pointing out is that without intention, that there's nobody intentionally really doing this, there's nobody actively pushing for this, but it's just saying that a thing is heard, and generally thought of as heard all over the place. So, oto ni kikoyuru is literally a sound is heard. And that's more of a literal way of translating it, but a more frank, a more technical way of translating it would be famous. This is how they said famous back in the day. Oto ni kikoyuru. And then yuru, because normally the verb is actually just kikoyu, and that's the ending form, that's the final form. If we were to end a sentence with this verb, it would be kikoyu. However, we're adding the ru on the end of it because we're making it into the attributive form, meaning that we're going to use it to describe a noun that comes after. And that's exactly what comes after. Here is yumi, which means bow, and then the kanji after that, the word after that is tori, which means to take, okay? So literally, yumi tori is bow take, or someone who takes up the bow, which means an archer, okay? Yumi tori, and then nari. Nari is the copula, is technically what the term is called in this instance. It is the ending form of the verb to be, or is, am, are, okay? So essentially what this phrase is saying is, oto ni kikoyuru, a famous yumi tori archer, nari, he is or he was, essentially, because we already have established that we're talking in the past, so in order to be a little more poetic, we're going to end with nari instead of what would be the past tense would be narikeri or nariki. But we already know that we're talking about the past, so we're just going to say yumitori nari instead. So he was a famous archer. Okay, satoki, this first word, satoki. The root word is satoru or satoshi, okay? Satoru means to be enlightened. It's what they usually talk about when you're an enlightened Buddha, you satoru, right? And that's a verb form. But then we turn it into a adjective form, satoshi, right? Which means intelligent, wise, understanding, etc., etc. But satoshi is the end form of it, okay? Satoshi, if we were ending the sentence with the verb, or not the verb, the adjective satoshi, that's how we would end it, satoshi. But we're turning it into the attributive form because we're using it to describe a noun that comes afterwards. So instead of satoshi, we say satoki. And what is intelligent or wise? The chisha. So chisha is a Chinese loanword, okay? It's not native Japanese, but the chi, this kanji here, chi, means knowing, understanding, okay? And then sha is a word, or it's a kanji that means a person. You see it in like ninja, although they just voice the sha, so it goes from sha to ja in the case of ninja. But ninja means one who sneaks, whereas this is one who knows. Chisha is one who knows. You could have musha, which is warrior person, one who is a warrior essentially. So satoki chisha, so a understanding wise man essentially. So it's emphasizing that he's a really smart guy, okay? And then we have nite. Now, ni is actually the connective form of that previous verb we just talked about, the copula nari, okay? And so it's the connective form, meaning that something is going to come after it. And then we have the te, which is a connective particle. I'm sorry if this is a little confusing, just bear with me. Essentially what it's doing is it's saying that he is a wise, intelligent person, and then we have the te, which is kind of functions as an and, but it doesn't just function as an and, if we just had ni there, it would work. The sentence would work, but it's not quite as concrete. It's not quite as specific. It wouldn't quite be quite as specific. So we add that te on there to mean like this is what he is. For any of you who know modern Japanese, the modern de, particle de, actually comes from nite. Because what happened is you have ni, te, and then over time the e got just faded away. So te is what it was. And we have an n that automatically puts your mouth and the way your mouth moves into a voiced motion, into a voiced position. So te, if you ended up saying that fast, it becomes de. And that's where we get de from, okay? So essentially what this is saying is that he was a wise, an understanding wise man, and ya is this next kanji right here. Ya is arrow. Saki means in front of or the tip. So his arrowhead, right? Yasaki. So, and that's the thing that actually strikes people because you have the whole arrow, but the part that actually does damage is the arrowhead. And so Yasaki, his arrow, essentially, hazurezu. So the root word of this hazuru is what it was in classical Japanese, modern Japanese is hazureru. But so hazuru, hazuru, and then we put it in the, I don't know how to say this, the mizenke is what it's called. It's the incomplete form, okay? We put it in the incomplete form is what I'll call it, and then we add the ending zu on it. And the ending zu is the final form of the negation auxiliary verb. So basically it says not whatever you attach the zu to, it's not that verb, okay? So hazuru means to miss. Hazurezu means to not miss. So essentially, he was a wise, smart person, and his arrow tips never missed. His arrow tips did not miss. So saying that he was a good archer and he was always spot on his target. Good archer. Okay, this one's going to take a little bit of explanation. So yumi, bow, ya, arrow. So that's generally classically when referring to the bow and arrow, that's what they would say, yumi ya. Yumi ya. And then we have this combination of kanji here, hachiman. This is not a native Japanese word. In fact, it's not even necessarily a Chinese loan word. It kind of is. But hachiman is originally a Buddhist deity. Originally a Buddhist deity, okay? That's where the concept of hachiman comes from. However, what happened is when this concept of this deity came to Japan and was hanging out and the idea was in Japan for a while, it gradually morphed into something more Japanesey. And so hachiman was in the, shall we say, mid-Heian period, late Heian period, and the early Kamakura period. Hachiman is the god of war. He's the god of warriors. And so Yumiya Hachiman is the archery Hachiman, the archery god of war, essentially is what it is saying here. And then we have the particle no. No, if you know in modern Japanese, is possessive, or again, it means of. So we've got of, so whatever comes after next belongs to the archery god of war, okay? And then oboe. Oboe, again, if you know modern Japanese, you know the verb oboeru, which means to remember or to naturally think is kind of a better way of thinking about it, especially classically. So in classical Japanese, the verb isn't oboeru, it's oboyu. But it means to think of something, but not to think of something as in like you're actively trying to solve it, you're actively trying to think about it. It's just the thoughts arise in you, essentially is what it means. But we're ending it this way instead of being oboyu or oboeru. We're ending it this way because when you end it this way, the connective form, one of the other things that the connective form does is it functions as a noun, okay? So if we have something like hashiru, the verb hashiru means to run, or hanasu means to speak. So if we have hashiri, means running, the act of running. Or if we have hanashi, hanashi means like a talk or a speech, something like that, a story even. So this is oboe, means the thoughts, the thinking, the opinion actually is the best way to translate it in this context. So it's the opinion of the archery god of war. Okay? And normally in modern Japanese, you would then follow this up with some kind of a particle like wa or ga, but it's classical Japanese and they don't do that a lot of the time. They don't do that unless it's mostly necessary. And in this case, it's not mostly necessary, so we're just not going to do it. So then the next word is ito. Ito just means very, extremely, or significantly. And then medetaku. Okay. Again, if you know modern Japanese, you'll instantly know this as medeto. This is the original form of medeto. But I'm going to break it down even more than what you think, because medeto, in modern Japanese, if you say omedeto, that means congratulations, okay? Is the best way to translate it into English. However, let's break it down. So the first part, me, means eyes, okay? Me means eye. And then de means to go out. Now, what most English speakers are going to be thinking is that, oh, your eyes pop out of your head. And actually, you know, that's not a terrible comparison, because when you see something that's really cool, they say your eyes pop out of your skull, right? It's like, whoa, it's like your eyes are trying to collect whatever it is so badly that they're about to pop out of your head, because it's just like, you know, you see in cartoons when old cartoons when one of the characters sees an attractive female and their eyes go blong, right? So your eyes go out as if they're trying to seek this thing. They're trying to get it. They're trying to get at it because they see something pleasing, and so they want to absorb it as much as possible. So they're trying to like get out of your head. So your eyes go out, which just means, like, you know, sight. And then taku comes from tashi, which again in modern Japanese you will recognize as the ending tai, which means want to. I want to. So hanashitai means I want to speak. Hashiritai, I want to run. Okay. However, we're putting it in this ending here with the ku because we're turning it into an adverb. We're taking it from an adjective, which describes a noun, and we're putting it into an adverb, which describes. We're taking it from an adjective, which describes a noun, and putting it into an adverb, which describes a verb. Or basically, it explains how the way in which one does a thing. So, mede taku means wanting to see, pleasing, appealing, nice, wonderful. And then the taku means in this manner, in a pleasing manner, or in a fantastic manner, a wonderful manner, is what it's getting at. And actually, we get medeto from this right here, because over time what happened is the ku in medetaku, the k sound eventually just fell off, so we were left with medetau. And in classical Japanese, if you have an a and an u, they eventually just kind of blended together and became an elongated o. So medeto. So if you were wondering why we say medeto in modern Japanese, that's where it comes from. Okay? So hopefully that you find that fascinating and interesting, like I do. Moving on. Okay. Oh, so the previous sentence was the archery god of war thought that Tadayori was, thought of Tadayori in a very pleasing, wonderful way. And then we have here yumitori, so archer. Ni, again, this is a particle that means at or to. Yoroi is armor, okay? O is a particle that denotes that the thing before it is the thing that is going to be receiving the action that comes afterwards, that comes later in the sentence, okay? And then tamawaru, okay? The root verb is tamahu, or tamo is how they would say it classically. And tamo means for a superior to give to an inferior. In modern Japanese, if you know the auxiliary verb masu, which takes a verb and makes it polite or not quite humble necessarily, but tamo kind of functions in the same way. Like if a noble does a thing, like a commoner would just hashiru, right? A commoner would run. A commoner or a peasant would just run. But if a commoner is talking to or about, if a commoner is talking about a nobleman, somebody who's higher on the social ladder than them, they would say hashiri tamo. Means they honorably run. It means they run and give unto them. Okay, because everything that the nobles did in a way of thinking was just kind of like viewed as them condescending and giving whatever it was to the lower peoples, the little people. But This is not the verb tamo, it's tamawaru. So what does that mean? Like I said before, so this is the passive voice, okay? This is, or it might even be reflective, I don't exactly know. But it changes the direction of the verb. It changes the direction that the verb is happening. So it is a superior giving to an inferior. However, in this case, what we're doing is we're looking at it from the lens of an inferior receiving from a superior. So, Yumitori ni yoroi o tamawaru basically means that Hachiman, the god of war, gave to this archer, Tadayori, armor. He gave him this armor. Alright, first word, karo keredo, okay? Comes from the root adjective karosh, which means light. However, what we have to do is, because of what the sentence is doing, we have to add on the kere, because that basically, it's an auxiliary verb. But the reason why we're doing that is because we want to make it into a verb so we can then add this do part to it, this do. And the reason why we want this do on there is because that means despite, or instead of, or, well, despite, or it kind of denotes that contrary to expectations, right? So karosh means light. Keredo means despite. So despite being light. Karo keredo, kataki, katai, katash is the root word here. Katash means hard, or in this case, strong, sturdy. So kataki, again, this turns it into the attributive form. We saw that a little bit earlier. Kataki koto. Koto means, again, this is a really hard word to actually translate, but it means thing. But it doesn't mean thing as in a physical thing. It means thing as in like an idea or a concept or a word, actually, is what they often use, is what it's often used for. And you see this pattern a lot when describing a thing's aspect, right? So if you guys are familiar with the Takeda Shingen slogan, Furin Kazan, which is wind, forest, fire, mountain, okay? And in its Japanese form, without just the Furin Kazan, which is shortened as just those 4 kanji, one of the ways you could say it, or like you'll hear Genji say in Overwatch, Hayaki koto, Hayaki means fast, Hayaki koto, the thing of fast, Kaze no gotoku, Kaze is wind, and then no is of, and gotoku is like, okay? So basically, Hayaki koto Kaze no gotoku means fast as the wind. And so this is kind of that same thing. It's kataki koto, the thing of being sturdy or strong. So it's sturdiness. It's sturdiness. Kono ue. So kono is this, referring to the armor. Ue, above. So things above this, anything above this. And then it ends with the word, which is technically an adjective, nash, which means does not exist, is not there, is not present. So basically what this sentence says, if you put it all together, is even though it was light, there was nothing sturdier and stronger than it. There was no armor that was sturdier or stronger than it. Or that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, because a lot of times if you say kono ue nash, you're not saying that there isn't any armor that would be stronger than it. There isn't anything that surpasses it. But it just means that it is extremely whatever it is. So in this case, the armor is extremely protective and strong. So. Okay. First word, koro, which means time period. Well, that's basically all it means, koro. And then shi is a particle that's emphatic. And then mo is a same thing in modern Japanese. It means even. So koro shimo basically means that on occasion, that's basically what it means. Kaizoku, this is a Chinese loanword, okay? Kai means ocean or sea, and zoku means bandit. So kaizoku means pirate. You know, pirate on the high seas. They get in boats and they go out and they pillage and plunder, okay? Then the next word, hama, means beach or shoreline. And then be means like the exterior parts of it or the surrounding areas. So like kawabe is like a riverbank. Or if you could have I don't know, what's another thing? Hamabe is a coastline, right? Is on the beaches. because that's the fringes of where the land meets the sea. Okay? So hamabe no, and then no is the of, and then this is an old way of writing mura, which means villages or settlements, right? So kaizoku, these pirates, hamabe no ura, o, and then the o denotes that it is these villages, these settlements on the beaches are going to be receiving whatever the following action is. And then ryakudatsu. Ryakudatsu is another Chinese loanword. It's not a native Japanese word. Ryaku means to plan, to scheme, to plan ahead. And then datsu means to take by force. So basically, the best way to describe this is pillage, okay? And then this last thing is shi, which is the general verb suru. Well, classically it was su. It wasn't just suru. Modern Japanese, we say suru. But classically it wasn't suru. That was the attributive form. We would say su is the ending form. But we're putting it in shi because shi is the connective form, because this is basically saying that the sentence is not done, that we're going to be continuing on here. Okay? So literally, occasionally pirates would attack the villages and pillage them. Okay? Moving on. Okay. And then these first three kanji, Azamo Ura, is just the name of a place. It's Azamo Be, which is a place in the game. Azamo Ura, no of, and then Tami. Tami means people. So the people of Azamo Ura, the people of Azamo Be. O, again, is meaning that they are going to be receiving the action that follows. Minna is, in modern Japanese, it means everybody. But classically, it was broader than that. It meant everything. So you could say something like kemono no minna, so all the animals. Or you could say like yama no minna, all the mountains, okay? So minna means all. In this case, it is referring to people, but it is followed up by the verb korosu. Korosu means to kill, okay? And then we add the shi because the shi turns it into a noun like we saw previously. So minagoroshi means massacre, complete slaughter, right? Which is dark, but I mean they're pirates. So minagoroshi ni. This is where explaining it is a little complicated. Because again, ni means to or at. But it's not quite that concrete and defined as those words are in English. It's basically a particle that's denoting that the verb that comes after it, they're making whatever happens into this. They're making the object that is receiving into this thing, okay? So minagoroshi ni sen. Sen is one word. And it's from the general do verb suru or su. But when you put it in the se and add the to it, it turns it into a volition, okay? It turns it into intentional. This is their intent. This is what they're going to do. It's not like they just stumbled in and they're actively and they just stumbled in and happened to massacre people. This is their intent. They are actively trying to do this, which, I mean, yeah, duh. But we're not done there. So, and then we have the to. To is a really hard one to translate if you're not familiar with modern Japanese. If you are familiar with Japanese, you probably already know what it is. But to is a particle that marks when somebody speaks, thinks, reads, writes, something like that. The closest thing that I can think of in English is that. When somebody says that, or writes that, or reads that, or thinks that. It's that. Lots of that. So, but even saying that, there's too many that's, I'm sorry, is saying a little too much, because this to is a little more ambiguous. So, but it's denoting intent. It's like they're specifically doing this, and then it's ending with the general do verb su. Okay, so it's very much highlighting that they are going out of their way. They are intentionally going and massacring these people on the beaches. Okay, which is dark, but again, it's pirates, and you know, if you didn't have villains, then you wouldn't have a game. So that's what we've got. Okay, tami, again, people. Wa, this is in modern Japanese. Many of you will know what it means. It denotes the subject of a sentence, in this case, in classically speaking, in classical Japanese, wa more denotes, wa is used when there's a general, a bigger picture, and we're talking about how this instance relates to that bigger picture, okay? So tami, the people, wa, mina, again, there it is again, tami wa minna, okay, all the people, hashiri, I already mentioned hashiru is to run, and hashiri means that we're in the connective form, so because we're not just running here. Hashiri chiredo. Chiru is a verb that means to scatter. And then we have it in the e, which is the, technically it's like a completed form, kind of. And then we have that do, which means even though or despite. So hashiri chiru means to run and scatter. So they're just running all over the place, helter-skelter, wild, trying to get away, right? But then we have this despite or even though ending, or this even though. So even though all the people scattered, ran helter-skelter all over the place. Okay. Tadayoriko, so Tadayori, that's his name. Hachiman, again, god of war. No, possessive. Yoroi, so the armor of Hachiman, the armor of the god of war. O, meaning that is the thing that is going to be receiving the action. Tsuke. The root verb is tsuku, which means to wear, to put on, okay? And then we have it in the connective form, because again, we're not done with the sentence. So, Tadayori dons the armor of the god of war. Okay. Ichinin. This is a Chinese loanword. And it's very interesting that they went with this choice because there is a native Japanese way of saying this same thing. Ichi means one, and nin means person. So, alone is what it means. However, there's a Japanese version of saying this, and that is hitori. And I think the reason why they went with the Chinese, the Sino-Japanese pronunciation of it, the way the Japanese attempt to say the Chinese version of it, is because classically, Chinese was considered the more masculine language, okay? Official documents were done in classical Chinese. Histories were written in Chinese. And Chinese was considered, again, the more masculine, hard, concrete language, whereas native Japanese was more poetic and a little bit feminine and flowery. And what would happen is, with warriors, warriors are really masculine, hardy, stout people. And so in this instance, to give it a little bit more of a rough, hardy edge to it, a little bit of a warrior edge, I think they say ichinin, which I believe also explains why instead of saying nite, like I explained, they actually did just shorten it to de, because the people who really started saying de instead of nite were the warriors, because, warriors don't have time for a lot of these little things, and they just kind of like, they take shortcuts, because it's just, we're warriors, we're here to do a job, we're going to do it, boom. So this ichinin de, one other way you could say it is hitori nite, but hitori nite is a little bit more flowery and a little bit feminine, whereas saying this is a little bit stronger, sturdy. It's like, oh, here he comes, right? So, ichinin nite, so by himself, by being alone. Tachi is to stand, and we're doing it in the connective form because we're not done, because it's not just standing. Tachi mukao. So mukao means to face. So stand and face. So it means that, he stands against, that he's like, come at me, bro. I'm ready for you. So he just stands strong and resolute. So he stood resolute by himself. He stood and faced them. Okay, kaizoku is pirates. Domo is a way of saying that together. It comes from the root word tomo, which means together. But domo means a plural. It pluralizes a thing. So the pirates, okay? The pirates, many pirates, several pirates. Oshi. This word oshi here. Oshi, at its basic form, it comes from osu, which means to push, okay? But nobody's physically pushing anybody here, right? Oshi, in classical Japanese, osu, kind of has this notation of forcefulness, right? Because when you push something, you don't just like lightly brush past it, right? You push. It's very intent. It's a very forceful action. So we have a forcefulness, and we put it in a connective form because it's attaching to this next verb, which is yosuru. So yosu means to come close to approach. So they forcefully approach. However, and this is where things get really interesting. If you study modern Japanese, this won't make sense to you. Well, actually, it will make sense. Hopefully it makes sense after I explain it. But this doesn't happen in modern Japanese because we put it in the attributive form. We add a ru on the end of it. Because normally it would just be oshi yosu. If we were ending the sentence, oshi yosu, that's it. That's the end. But we say oshi yosuru. And again, that's an attributive form, meaning that it's there to modify or describe a noun that follows. But if you notice, there's no noun that comes after it. What the heck? What does that mean? And the reason why is because classic Japanese fashion, modern Japanese does it too, but classical Japanese did it more, is it's implied. There is an implied noun here. We already know what it's talking about. And we don't need to specify what the noun is. You should just already know what the noun is. So in this instance, there technically could be a toki, which means time. And in this pattern, it would that would make the sentence. It's kind of like in English when we say, when such and such happens. You say in Japanese, suru toki. Nani nani suru toki. When X and X happens, okay? And then ni, toki ni is, modern Japanese, that's a marker, a place marker, or a time marker, right? So, when the pirates forcefully approached, okay? When the pirates forcefully approached Tadayori, again, we're not going to say Tadayori because it's classical Japanese, and we don't say anything that we don't need to say. Okay, Tadayori ko is just his name, Tadayori. Hiki comes from hiku, which means to pull, but we put it in a connective form because we're not done talking about it. He didn't just pull, but hiki katame. Katame comes from the previous the previous word that we saw, katashi, which means hard, strong, or without moving, right? Only now it's in a verb form. So hiki katame. So he pulled back strongly and, he held it for a second, right? Hiki katame, or he pulled back strongly, sturdily, mightily, I guess you could say. And we have the katamu as the original verb, but katame puts it into a connective form because we're not done here. So he pulled, and ya, arrow, o, the arrow is receiving this action. Hanateba comes from the original verb hanatsu, which means to release, to let go. And then we have the teba, which the meaning of teba, of ba in this instance, is when. Now, some of you who speak modern Japanese are going to be like, what do you mean when? That's clearly the eba ending is means if. What are you talking about, dude? Well, the thing about classical Japanese, okay, is the ba just denotes a conditional situation, okay? It denotes condition. But in classical Japanese, if you have the eba, because the e ending, what is the base 5 ending? I don't remember, but you have if we have hanatsu, right? Hanata, hanatsu, hanachi, or hanata, hanachi, hanatsu, hanate, and then you guys learn hanato, even though that's not really a thing. But hanate, the e one, right, is the finished, there's a meaning behind it, and it means a finished version, okay? So we have it in the finished version, and then we add a conditional. So condition, finished condition, which translates to if, or not if, but because, or when. Meaning that this happens. This is a thing that happens. It's not a debate whether or not it's happening or it will happen. It's happened, okay? And then we add a condition. So condition, because it happened. Hanateba means because or when he released the arrows, okay? When he released the arrows. Now, in classical Japanese, if you wanted to do the if statement, which all of you modern Japanese speakers are thinking, you would put it in the a base, because the a base is the not done. The mizenke is what it's called. So, e is izenke, a is mizenke, okay? Not done. And because it's the not done version, that's where you add your negation to it, or you add your causative to it, or you add your, I don't know, what's another word, your passive to it, because it means not done. So what you would do there is, if you wanted to say, if he released the arrow, yao hanataba, because you're adding a condition to not done yet. So it's not done So if the condition is there, if the condition is right, then blah, blah, blah. Sorry, for you non-Japanese speakers, that was a little bit of a detour. Apologies. But it's the modern Japanese speakers are probably like, oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, moving on. Okay. So when he releases his arrows, oyoso means completely, totally. Oyoso, I comes from the root verb iru, which means to shoot. And then there's korosu again, which is koroshi, which means that we're not done here. So oyoso I koroshi. So he shot dead everybody, completely shot them dead. Okay. Nokorishi. Nokoru is the root verb, is the original verb, means remain. Okay. And then nokorishi, because we're putting it in the connective form, and then we're adding shi. Now, shi takes a little bit of explanation. So shi is the attributive form of the auxiliary verb ki. Okay. Ki, the simplest way of explaining it, ki is a past tense. Okay. However, I don't know why it does this, but the attributive version of ki, of past tense, is classically is shi, and you add it to the connective form of a verb. Okay. So nokorishi is, the original verb is leave, so nokorishi is left. But because it's an attributive thing, a noun or an implied noun has to follow it. Okay. So nokorishi mono. Mono means people or those, the ones who. Okay. So nokorishi mono, the ones who were left, the ones who remain standing. Okay. No is possessive, modern Japanese possessive, katana. Now I find it interesting here, because technically, if this is during the Mongol invasions, or if this is even, this is supposed to be a few hundred years before the Mongol invasions is when this legend supposedly happened, right? They did not have katana in the same way that they're implying here, okay? Katana, the original word, like it appears in the Kojiki, which is one of the oldest written texts of Japanese ever, okay? Katana shows up there. But katana means a short sword. And then some of you who are big samurai buffs are like, well, what are you talking about? Katana is, the samurai longsword, like the samurai in the Edo period and the Warring States period even, they had their katana, and which was their longsword, and then they had a wakizashi, right? So what are you talking about? The katana is a short sword. Because here's the thing. At this time, they didn't use katana, they used tachi. Tachi literally is written with the characters big blade. A tachi is bigger than a katana, okay? Tachi are the big swords, the long swords, the actual big, huge swords, okay? It's not a no dachi, quite frankly, but it's a tachi. And so when they started making katana, which were shorter than the tachi, they're like, oh, it's a short blade, it's a short sword, so it's a katana, okay? So that's where that comes from. But it is a little anachronistic here to put katana here because they didn't have katana in that same sense. They would have just used tachi. However, because, they want to attract people and they want it to be accessible, and for people who know a little bit about samurai culture and a little bit about Japanese history, want to be able to make sense to them, they put katana in here because it just sounds cooler. But that is a little bit of an anachronism. That doesn't mean the game is bad. Please enjoy the game. It's a great game. I enjoyed it. But I'm just pointing that out, okay? It's a little minor nitpick. Okay. So, nokorishi mono no katana. So the swords of those who were left standing, mo, even, is what mo means. Even the swords of the people who were remaining. Yoroi, armor. O means the armor is receiving this action. Toru. Toru means to go through, to pass through. But then we have it in the incomplete form, and then we have it in the zu, the negative, the final ending version. So they didn't pass through. So to translate this whole sentence, so even the swords of those who were left standing after getting shot by arrows, they could not pass through the armor, Tadayori's armor. So even though people would come and attack him with swords, with katana, even though it should have been tachi, it wouldn't pass through his armor. He was fine. Okay, and here we go. We've got iku, which is several, unknown number, but multiple. Tose, years, so several years. No is of, and then nochi means afterward. Well, technically means behind, but it means, in this case, it means after. So several years later. Tadayori ko. So Tadayori. Ojo no hodo. Ojo is another Chinese loanword. The first kanji means to go on a journey, to leave. Okay. And then the second kanji, jo, or another way of saying it is sei, means life. So to go away from life. It's a very, I would say, euphemistic way of saying to pass on. Actually, to pass on is a very, very apt translation for it. So ojo, so when he passed away. Ojo no, and then of, hodo. Hodo in this case means, hodo literally means like a extent. It's a measurement. So the measure of death, the measure of passing on, which in this case, the best way to translate it would be when, okay, or time. In modern Japanese, they'll say it still, sometimes they'll say sakihodo instead of sakiwa. So saki again means at the tip or before, sakihodo. So it's like this thing that just happened, right? So when he passed on, so several years later when Tadayori passed on. Okay, Hachiman, god of war, no, of, yoroi. So the armor of Hachiman. Mo, also. So mo in this instance means also. So also the armor of Hachiman. Kie comes from the root word is kiyu. Modern kieru means to disappear. And then we have it in the connective form because we're emphasizing it by saying kie and then usu or usekiri in this instance. So the root verb is usu, modern useru, and but we have that, and that means to disappear. Well, to disappear and to go away. And we put that in the connective form so we can add this keri ending. And in the previous video, I mentioned this keri. It's got two main uses. One is a past tense thing, but it's not a past tense in like, oh, this happened, but it's kind of a recollective thing. It's got a bit of a, oh yeah, feel to it. And that, oh yeah, feel to it also informs its second use, which is a poetic ending. So in poetry, a lot of times in poetry, they'll add keri on the end of a verb, even though they're not actually recalling something in the past, but it adds a little bit of an to it. It adds a little bit of a poetic emphasis on it. So it's very poetic what it's saying here. So what it's saying is, after Tadayori passed on, the armor of Hachiman, the Hachiman armor, also disappeared. And it's kind of like and it also disappeared. Oh, we're adding poetic pizzazz to it. Okay, this is a little bit long. So hito means people or person, but not as in like a general populace kind of a thing, but like individual people, okay? No, and this is finally where we see the no, but it's not comparative to a classical no. That means that's possessive or of. This denotes the subject of a sentence, because classically the particles no and ga were basically the same. It's just no was a little bit more poetic, okay? So it's saying that people, and people are the ones who are doing this following action. Then iwaku, the root verb is iu, which means to speak. And modern Japanese speakers will understand that. But here's the thing. The reason why it's in this form, this iwaku, which again, modern Japanese people are going to be like, what the heck is that all about? The reason why it's in this form is because the Japanese learned how to write from the Chinese, okay? And especially in the early years, they didn't really know how to adapt the Chinese writing system, which was beautifully made for expressing Chinese, into their language, which, linguistically speaking, Chinese and Japanese are nothing alike. Not even close. Like at their roots, completely different languages. So adopting this writing system, which was built for Chinese, into Japanese was clunky at best, okay? And so in Japanese, when you say somebody says such and such, you put the verb to say at the end. So person such and such says, okay? Whereas in Japanese or in English and in Chinese, actually, you say person says such and such, okay? And so when trying to make sense of the writing system, the Chinese writing system in Japanese, they messed around with things a little bit to make it a little bit easier for people to understand and to read. And so what they would do with iu is they would put it in the front so it would have person says such and such, But again, grammatically speaking, that doesn't work in Japanese. Technically, the says is supposed to come at the end, so they do this little bit of grammatical manipulation. So you can have it that way, but it still makes some kind of sense. And it just became a stock phrase. So the people said, Tadayori ko no matsue. So the Tadayori, no, of, or possession, or of, matsue. So matsu means tip or end. And then e means, this is a Chinese loanword, by the way. E means descendants. So the tip or the ending is, if you think about like a family tree, right? The youngest people, the descendants, are the ones at the very edges of the branches, where the older ones, come from the roots. And so that's what matsue means, is the descendants. So the descendants, so Tadayori ko no matsue is the descendants of Tadayori. Naru. So this is the attributive form of the copula nari, which means to be. So those who are the descendants of Tadayori, naru mono, and then again, the naru is in the attributive form because mono is the ones who are. The ones who are the descendants of Tadayori. So the ones who are the descendants of Tadayori. Kore, so this, in referring to the armor. So kore, o, means the armor is what is receiving the following action, which is mochi, which is to hold or to have. And then it's in the continuative form because we're not done with the sentence. So people said that the descendants of Tadayori have the armor and okay, tada means just or only. Tsushima is the name of the island, so it's the place where the game takes place. And then Tsushima o, so Tsushima is the one who receives the following action of mamoru, which means to protect. And that's the same in classical, actually in classical Japanese you would say moru. Mamoru is adding me, but with a little bit of a sound change from e to a. So mamoru is to watch and protect, but mamoru, and that's already in an attributive form. Tsuwamono, so this word here, tsuwamono. Tsuwamono means warrior, okay? And here's the thing. This I actually appreciate because the term samurai wasn't used to exclusively refer, the term samurai wasn't associated or wasn't a synonymous with warrior until way later in Japanese history. As far as I can tell, the only concrete time where we can say that samurai equaled warrior was the Edo period in the 1600s, okay? Before that, samurai basically just meant servant, or it meant one who served a higher. And the general word that they use, like in most of the vast majority of the stories that I translate, when they refer to warriors, they don't say samurai, they say tsuwamono. They use this term here, tsuwamono, okay? So, tada Tsushima o mamoru tsuwamono. So, warrior that protects Tsushima. No. So, and again, this is the, in this instance, it could be either possessive or it could just be the ga. It could be marking the subject of that this is the thing that's doing the action. Tazune comes from the root verb tazunu in modern Japanese, tazuneru, which means to ask or to seek out, to call on, to visit, okay? Tazune, and then we have it in the connective form, continuing. Oh yeah, connective, we'll say connective. Kuru, root verb ku, modern Japanese kuru, but the ending form is ku, and kuru is the attributive form, okay? So to come is what it means, to come. So to come asking, and then kuru, and then again, it's attributive form, but there's no following noun because the noun is implied as koto in this instance, kuru koto. So the thing of a warrior that protects Tsushima, the thing of coming and asking, the thing of a warrior that protects Tsushima coming and asking. O means that is receiving the action that follows. Matsu is to await, and that's in the ending form, matsu, which is modern Japanese matsu. So await, they simply await the coming of a warrior who will protect Tsushima. Okay. Oh boy. These are so long. This is so long, but so hopefully that clears some things up. Hopefully you understand a little bit. I'm kind of rambly and going on really, really fast. I don't have a lot of time to get into detail about how all of this works or give you some really concrete examples, but hopefully you understood it a little bit. Hopefully it made some sense, and hopefully you can now appreciate a little bit more of Japanese culture, Japanese language, and these games that we play. And I'm not going to do just Ghost of Tsushima. Once I get through all of these Mythic Tales, I do plan on moving to other things. But hopefully you enjoyed this video, you found it informative, and if you did, please give it a like. If you want to stay informed for when more of these come out and you want to practice more classical Japanese, more of these are going to be coming out. So please subscribe to the channel if you want to stay on top of that, or you want to keep abreast of the classical stories that I am translating into English. Please subscribe to the channel. Yeah. So, but I want to thank you very much for taking all the time to come and watch this. If you're still here at the very end, it is sincerely appreciated. And hopefully we will see you in the next one. But for now, we'll see you later. Goodbye.